So chapter 2 is all about data. So data can be numbers, it could be names, all kinds of different labels. It's not always, just because there's a number there doesn't mean it's numeric. Like 1 equals male, sometimes we use numbers to represent different categories. And this is really important here, this word right here, context. We'll use that word a lot in stat class. We care about the context. We want you to write about the context. When you talk about data, where did it come from? What is the context of that data? Actually, you want to talk about the 5 W's. You don't have to mention them like this W and so forth, but you need to talk about those when you write sentences. So, of course, who, what, when, where, and how, and why. If possible, why. Why is not always possible. And this one is, if you right at the bottom, is how. How did you get it? So those are all important to talk about. When you're talking about data, okay, where did you get it from? Who is involved? When did you get this data? All those things could be important. All those could be very important to understanding how significant the data is. So when you talk about who, we're talking about cases here, for which we have the individual cases where you collect data. So here are the words we're going to use to describe the who, the individuals. We might call them respondents if they respond to a survey. They might be called subjects, the subjects of our study, the participants. So that could be another word for those. Or experimental units. Be careful with this one though, because people for some reason object to us calling them experimental units. It sounds like they're a guinea pig. So we usually use the word experimental units to talk about animals, plants, or things that aren't alive. A variable is any characteristics of an individual. So when we talk about variables, what are the variables here? It is a characteristic. It's another word for variable there. It's a characteristic of some individual. They take on different values for different individuals. So there are different types of variables. One is called categorical. So categorical variables, we'll use that term. Occasionally you'll see, this is kind of old school, qualitative is another word for categorical. So you could see that word. Most likely you're going to see categorical. That means we put them into groups or categories, right? That's the idea. We're grouping them. We're putting them into categories. Examples of this would be by sex, in other words, like males and females, by race, whites, blacks, and so forth. Ethnicity, what is your ethnicity? And so we were going to categorize people or animals or whoever by those into categories. Quantitative are different than categorical. So the thing I want you to remember about this is they are measured. So quantitative variables are measured. Some quantity or amount. So we're measuring money or in inches or in pounds or whatever. Anytime you're measuring something, that's a quantitative variable. So it does get tricky. In fact, this is probably the hardest part of the chapter. If you do a few of the homework problems, you'll see that this is where it gets a little dicey. Teacher evaluation, you've seen this. The instructor is generally interested in teaching. Do you disagree strongly, agree strongly, so forth. So you have numbers and you have these, which seem to be categories. Is it categorical or quantitative? Is it measured or is it categorical? Well, this one doesn't really fall into either of those categories exactly, so it's called an ordinal. There does seem to be some type of order to this. Disagree, agree, but as you can see, 4 is not twice what 2 is. You see, if I multiply disagree by 2, I don't get agree. So these numbers don't mean exactly what numbers normally mean, but they do have some type of order to them, and so that's called an ordinal variable. That can get tricky at times. So one type of categorical is an ordinal variable. So that's technically a categorical variable. They can be ordered or ranked, like grades, A, B, C, D, clothing sizes, small, medium, large, or attitudes like we just saw in that example. Nominal variables are another type of, this is getting real detailed here. We just definitely need to know categorical. If you forget the word nominal, it's not a big deal. It cannot be organized in a logical sequence, like males and females. Well, business type, eye color, blue, brown. How do you tell which one to put first? Alphabetical, I guess. You can't really put them in really a logical sequence. Religion, same thing. Brand names. Quantitative variables are two types. There are continuous variables. Occasionally you might see a question like this, not real often, but values for a certain level, for a certain set of real numbers. So this one's a hard one for me to define. You have to see some examples to understand this concept of continuous. So height is continuous. For example, you might have someone who's 6 foot exactly, and another guy who's 6 foot and 1 inch. Is it possible there's a person who is in between 6 foot and 6 foot 1? Actually, I am. I'm 6 foot and 1/2 inch, so I fit in the middle between those two guys, right? Well, is it possible there's someone between me at 6 foot and 1/2 inch and someone who's 6 foot? Is it possible that there's someone who's in between us? Yes, the values between a certain set of numbers are essentially kind of infinite. They're continuous. Those are called continuous variables. So age, how old are you? Well, you might say I'm 46 years old or 16 years old, whatever you are, right? But really, you're 16 years old in a certain number of days or a certain number of hours or a certain number of minutes, that kind of thing. We could keep breaking it down by seconds and so forth. Of course, it's always changing. But you can see that's a continuous variable. Same thing with temperature. You know, all kinds of different decimals there. Discrete variables can't take the value of a fraction between values. Like, these are numbers of items here. So, number of registered cars, number of business locations, number of children in a family. Some people might argue your smaller brother doesn't count as a whole person, but he would. So all of the measured values of whole units, 1, 2, 3, 4 cars. Counts are always discrete. Any kind of count is a discrete number. How the data are collected makes a big difference. So this is a big deal. We'll talk more about this when we get to chapters on this kind of stuff, but this is a good example you need to know. Internet surveys are notoriously suspect for us as statisticians. And the reason is, you know, what if you say, well, how many of you like the Memphis Grizzlies is your favorite team? Well, you may respond to that if Memphis is your favorite team. Does that mean that, you know, when there's 4 choices, you know, there's the Grizzlies and the Clippers and so forth. There's other teams. And so you say, well, if you feel strongly, you're going to reply. So it's going to be biased. There's a response bias there. Or oftentimes with political issues, you know, do you believe in abortion? Well, if you believe in abortion, you might take the survey. If you don't believe in abortion strongly, you might take the survey. If you're kind of in the middle, you might not take the survey. So people who feel strongly one way or another often respond to these internet surveys. So those surveys really are only gauging people who feel really strongly about the subject. They're not a good representative sample of everyday folks who may or may not feel strongly about the particular sports team or topic. What can go wrong? You know, the toughest thing sometimes is it categorical or quantitative? Quantitative are measured, categorical, put into groups or categories. Just because your things have numbers in them doesn't necessarily mean it's quantitative, like those one disagree kind of thing. Don't take data. Always be skeptical. You'll learn to be skeptical of data. We have to know the context. We can't just be given data and say, okay, let's go. Where did it come from? How did they get it? Who's involved? All those. When was this taken? Was this 50 years ago? Or was this last week? So we need to know all those kinds of things. Very good. That is the end of your Chapter 2 screencast. Thank you for